Really grateful to have you all here. My name is Pui-ling Lu Ngomeng Hailo Pui-ling. I use they, them pronouns. And my peoples are from Guangzhou, China, southern China, and also Vietnam as well, that I'm actively figuring out. It's a journey to figure out where my people are when we've moved around so much. And now, home for me is in Oakland, California, Lishan Ohlone land.
Hi, y'all. My name is Jovida. I also go by Jo. She or they pronouns both work. And my peoples come from Eastern Europe, Ukraine, Moldova, of Ashkenazi descent, and then also Western Europe of Celtic, Anglo, and Germanic descent. It is definitely a journey to reconnect with those lineages. I'm also based in Oakland on Lishan Ohlone land. I'm really glad to be here with you all here and support the work that you're doing.
Okay, so we are here to dream. And I take that really seriously. Especially in a time where new worlds are desperately needed, navigating multiple planetary crises, and just seeing people that we care about across the globe, and the violence that we're witnessing during this time to our peoples, our lands, and our waters. And so
also recognizing all the ways that food and food communities are helping us grow a future where we can all flourish, and recognize that you all are doing that, and that dreaming the world we want can help us actually grow it. If we can imagine it, it's easier to move towards it.
Yeah, so that's really why we're here, to create a shared vision of what we're working towards, and instead of thinking about what our opposition and what we're working against, to be rallying around what we want to grow and what brings us life. And so today's goal is to do that, and dreaming is a practice and it's a process, and so it's iterative. And so what I also hope is that this is the beginning of continued dreaming and visioning with your communities.
We didn't say we work with Food Culture Collective, and a lot of what we do at Food Culture Collective is to connect with cultural lineages and to connect with the histories of how communities have been resourced culturally through food and around food, and also how we want to carry those forward for future generations.
Speaking of lineage, I'd like to just give name to those that have shaped this Dream Lab for us. This includes Aisha Shillingford, who is an anti-disciplinary artist and world builder, and poet of Intelligent Mischief. Their work is dope. Check it out. And also the many, many Black and Indigenous futurists, and activists and artists that continue to engage in futurism, particularly our queer, our trans, our Black and Indigenous people of color, those who are at our margins, but that we are bringing into the center, and what becomes possible when those who are at the margins are brought to the center, and what becomes possible when their dreams are flourishing.
Our dreams.
Yes, dreams of us all. And so I really invite you to drop into the possibility of of dreaming and that sense of possibility in our time together today. And so we are gonna start off with a story. Stories are lived expressions of our dreams coming true, and so we're gonna start and ground in story.
Yeah, and this you'll hear, but this particular story comes from an audio fellow who worked with Food Culture Collective last year to surface and share stories of food sovereignty in moments big and small. And this is a story of a community they are connected with. This is Danelle's episode, right? We have a tech. The episode will tell you, this is an episode of a podcast. It's called Radical Nourishment. And we'll listen to this as to help orient us and just connect with the values embedded in the story and see what it sparks for our wishes for the future.
4 o'clock spilling over fresh straw mulch around the feet of a sign, and it reads Bethany Bronzeville Community Garden.
So this is the Bethany Bronzeville Community Garden. Bethany for the church, Bronzeville for the community. We've got our beds. We got cabbages. The one back there is empty. I'm getting ready to put in some spinach, some cool crop things. We got eggplant coming in. Plenty.
Bethany for the church, Bronzeville for the community.
Kale.
Service and self-sovereignty, displacement and connection all flow down through the lifeways of this very special place. The garden before us is a verdant mix of native and non-native plant varieties and of permacultural and rotational techniques. It reflects Julia Lynn Walker's training, both as a child of U.S. farms and gardens and as a student of permaculture gardeners in Ghana, Tanzania, and South Africa. Those are principles that she reflects in the online gardening classes she teaches, part of a free online gardening program called the Agri-Academy.
But also, this year, I moved it to emphasize more the African connections to contemporary agriculture. So even talking about indigenous botanicals, because people don't even think about the fact that every plant has a home somewhere in the world. Just because we've been, moving it around and whatever, adopted it and think it's ours. No, it doesn't happen.
Like the plants that Julia Lynn describes, her Bronzeville neighborhood reflects a history of thriving in spite of forced displacement. Bronzeville is the heart of African American culture in Columbus. Its history goes back to slavery, with a large, free, and self-emancipated black population well before the Civil War. But Bronzeville really took off during the Great Migration, when thousands of black people, including Julia Lynn Walker's maternal grandparents, migrated north, seeking some relief from the constant violence of Jim Crow.
My maternal lineage came here through the healthcare profession. And so there were 3 sisters in Atlanta, and they were encouraged to come to Columbus by a doctor who opened the first African-American owned hospital here in Columbus. And so 2 of them were nurses, and the third, and this was just typical of the era, again, early 1900s, the third came to make sure they didn't get into trouble. But she was the oldest.
Yeah.
She was a domestic worker. She dropped out with an elementary school education, but she kept a home for her 2 younger sisters while they worked as nurses. All right? So, and that was the pattern for a number of people.
Columbus's relatively widespread and affluent black communities led to a vibrant commercial and cultural identity and a strong sense of solidarity from the start. There were black neighborhoods spread all around Columbus, but Bronzeville on the Near East Side was the center. The neighborhood's heart is Mount Vernon Avenue, where in the early 20th century, shoppers could get everything from baked goods to produce and meat to a barber shave and a big band show, all within walking distance. The neighborhood even elected its own separate mayor and cabinet to build political power for and of the black community. That's the world into which Julia Lynn was born, the child of Linwood P. Walker and Ann B. Walker. And the Walkers raised their kids to experience the interconnections between self and community sovereignty.
My parents were very strong civil rights activists. You know, I never had a perfect attendance record at school because they would take us out for demonstrations, or they'd take us out to hear a speaker, or they would take us out to take a trip. They'd just say, no, we're going to take a family trip to so-and-so because this is a good idea at this time, and, you know, you'll catch up with your lessons.
Yeah.
You know? And so I understood early that part of life is a responsibility for others. That there is, yes, you're responsible for self, and certainly in the household, you know, we had chores and, you know, etc. But also within the broader community, you had a responsibility to do whatever you could do.
Those chores that Julia Lynn mentions were often about growing and storing food.
My nuclear and extended family have always been involved in household sustainability with respect to food production. So we've always had a garden wherever we were. The extended family, there were farms outside of Columbus, both the east and the south side. My grandfather hunted. Come August, I would know, okay, before school, that means I got the can. And we're going to be sitting there cutting up stuff, you know, the mom's going to go buy all this stuff because she's like, the shelves have to be filled. This is going to be peaches, it's going to be apples, it's going to be, and we're like, oh, that sounds like a lot of cutting. That's all we know.
In the 70s, Julia Lynn Walker launched a 40-year career in law and education that spanned the U.S. and Africa. After retiring, she returned to Bronzeville in the early 2010s. But it wasn't the neighborhood that she had left.
So it started with the 50s with Eisenhower and the interstate, and Columbus is the only city that has had 3 interstate highways go through its primary African American community. And so you can imagine it was 71 first on the west, then 70 south, and then 670 on the north. Homes taken out, businesses, and then after the highways, then urban renewal soon followed. And in the you know, cleaning, in the interest of cleaning up, a lot of buildings were demolished and unfortunately left vacant. And it was very interesting coming back and actually going to live in Columbus. I didn't have a car for the first 3 months, so I just walked the community. And I was really astonished at the decline, at the lack of resources. And even though I knew and saw, but to actually live here now, say, okay, now how do you negotiate? How do you navigate? How do people function? And it's not possible.
3 highways, years of hostile urban planning, neglect, and deferred maintenance. It had all left Bronzeville without access to enough safe housing or to most of the necessities of daily life. The neighborhood's last full-service grocery store, the black-owned Carl L. Brown Food Liner, had closed more than a decade earlier.
So after about 6 months, I was horribly depressed. Horribly. And I just started tearing up whatever land I had access to. I was just start. People were like, okay, don't let her anywhere near your house because she's going to start talking about, don't you want a garden? So that was when we came here. This was literally just an overgrown field. And I cleared literally just this part right here and put in a dozen strawberry plants and some cabbages and, you know, whatnot. And that was fine. But then we said, but wait a minute, there's a broader community, and this is where we got into food sovereignty issues.
The Bethany Bronzeville Community Garden began growing fresh fruits and vegetables for a free lunch program started by Ann B. Walker, Julia Lynn's mother. Other programs followed, including the Bronzeville Urban Growers Association, the Online Agri Academy to train new gardeners, and classes on financial sustainability for small urban farmers. 6 years ago, Julia Lynn gathered together some of the small urban farms of Columbus's Franklin County and started a farmer's market as well.
And so this is our 6th season to operate a farmer's market. And what we'll do is, you're going to get in my car and I'll take you around there.
Beautiful. The Bronzeville Urban Growers Association, or BUGS for short, runs 6 community garden spaces throughout the Near East neighborhoods of King, Lincoln, Bronzeville, Mount Vernon, and Woodland Park. That's just a fraction of the 24 community gardens throughout the Near East. The gardens are all in walking distance of one another, but in deference to the summer heat and time constraints, we amble instead through a series of alleys in Julia Lynn's truck. We pass the Julia Lynn Walker Learning Gateway Garden at the King Arts Complex, as well as the backyard gardens of Julia Lynn's friends and students. We come to a stop in a beautiful space. Overflowing demonstration beds sit among shipping containers decorated with murals.
This is the Maroon Arts Group Box Park. And Maroon referencing the African Americans who refused to be enslaved and escaped into the hinterland, the swamps, the mountains, whatever. Arts because they're creatives, and group because it just sounds better than corporation. And then we have our greenhouse, and then we've got the 5 beds here that we have as a demo garden. And then it's also the site for the Bronzeville Growers Market. And
We hop back in the car and visit.
Okay, so to move from this story of community food sovereignty into our own dream space, we'll start by connecting with ways of knowing beyond the analytical mind. And so this is all offered as an invitation. You, of course, you're the one in your body, so you get to choose how you respond to these invitations that I'll be offering. But if it feels easeful and supportive to you, I invite you to find a comfortable position. Maybe your weight is distributed evenly. You're welcome to stand if you like, or sit on the floor if that would be more comfortable for you. And so starting to tune into the sensations that the information your body is giving you through sensation. And if there's any movement that your body is asking for to feel more comfortable right now, feel free to wiggle or bounce or stretch or sway. Just starting to tune into that way of knowing and relating to yourself and the world. And maybe take a deep breath and slow the breathing down. And eyes can be open and broad and soft or closed if that feels supportive for starting to tune into the inner world. Before we fully go into dream space, I want to just support us to resource somatically. And so first starting by letting the body feel held by gravity. So tuning into the sensation of weightedness and seeing if there's places your body is holding itself up that it can or could let go. Letting the earth hold you as fully as possible. Letting the belly be soft. And with that sensation of weightedness, rootedness, being held by the earth, feel that opens up space higher up in the body, and it's almost like the spine is a little seedling reaching for the sun. And so start to feel the crown of the head reaching up. And feel your full length and dignity. And then start to feel sense into your width. So wherever your body notices width, the first place I usually go is my outer shoulders, my upper arms. It might be for you your hips or your feet. And knowing that you are in community, shoulder to shoulder, with many peoples and beings. Maybe a couple specific relationships come to mind. And letting your breath fill their side ribs. So going as wide as possible and even beyond the physical body. And then starting to feel the back side of the body. The back ribs, the skin on the back. Maybe imagine you have a long, heavy dinosaur tail that is also rooted to the earth. Sending breath into the back ribs and knowing there are lineages of people and beings who have your back, who have helped you be here today, and who want to support you. And then starting to feel into the depth back to front. So holding still a sense of your back, starting to feel forward in the body, the belly, chest. Letting the breath expand your depth back to front. And knowing that ahead of us are future generations, that we are a connection between the past and the future. And sending the breath low and slow. So feeling the focus of the inhale go to the low belly, between the navel and the tailbone, belly button and tail. And the exhales slower than the inhales. Start to tune into imagination. Imagine the place that you call home 7 generations in the future. So a child who has children, who has children, who has children 7 times, roughly 150 years. And the values that you heard about in this story of community care have flourished and spread. The future inhabitants of your home place have invited you, current life you, to visit. So you're traveling through a portal in time. And they are inviting you to learn from the community that they've grown. They are so grateful for the work that you did and the folks you are in community with have done to make more cooperative community food systems possible. And they want to tell you that story and how it's going. And so you move through this portal to come into an inclusive, culturally rich, mutually nourishing community food system in which all the beings who are part of feeding our human communities are nourished and cared for. In this space, caring for community is recognized as a sacred responsibility. And the places we live, humans live, have been completely reshaped so that all of our infrastructure, homes, and systems now support thriving community in the flow of life. We've recognized that we all belong to the land and that together we have what we need to flourish. In this future world, our communities are deeply grounded in cooperation. Let yourself drink that in. What are the sensations of this place? What does it look like, feel like, smell like, sound like? Who lives here? Who is welcome? Who belongs? And the future descendants who are living here take you around to visit community. Notice, what are the relationships like? How do people relate to each other across generations? How do people relate to other beings who are more than human? What rituals and ceremonies do people practice that honor our connection with one another, our responsibility and care for one another? Where and why do they happen? And what's involved? How are people living? How are homes and neighborhoods, cities and fields, places of community care? And how are those spaces governed to support belonging, cooperation, care, food sovereignty? Who is governing? How are decisions made? What resources are stewarded for the collective good? What is our relationship to work, to labor? How does work support care and cooperation? How are young people learning? What do they learn about? What are the environments that they learn in? How do people navigate tensions and conflicts of needs? How do people address harm and support repair? How do we support all people in their wholeness? How is cooperation integrated across all aspects of life and community, literally and metaphorically? And I'll give you some breathing space. If there is anything else that you would like to investigate or learn about in this future space, let your imagination roam, or ask your future hosts any questions that you might have of them. And then with your next breath, starting to bring awareness to your sensations in the here and now. So it might be the air on your skin, or the light beyond your eyelids, or the sounds around you, the presence of other bodies near you. And as you are ready, bringing yourself back to this time and place in this room, letting your eyes float open if they are closed. And just taking a breath to arrive.
So now is the part where we get to dream and scheme together in community. And so on each and every table, there are at least 1 or 2 prompts, and we have a couple more to add to these tables. And so for the next half an hour, really, this is an opportunity to draw upon what may have come through for you in your dreaming and visioning just now, and also to, not necessarily, it doesn't have to be like an entirely heady experience, kind of just our bodies can be places of information, and also each other. So to like really get play in our dreams with one another. And these prompts are meant to be really specific and granular about these visions of our future that we're growing together. And so in groups, they're about, I probably with your table, to roam around table to table with your group and visit each and every question, and together talk about the questions and what you imagine of this future. And then after about 30 minutes of that, we'll come back together, we'll debrief that, and then think about next steps, because there's our vision, and then there's actually what this means for this moment.
And are we inviting people to write down glimpses of the future? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So there are Post-its, there are pens on the table. So write down what you're imagining, either on Post-its or either on the paper that you see in front of you. Does anyone have any questions?
So feel free to dive in. If you have questions that you didn't want to name fully to the group, you're welcome to approach us.
Welcome back from this ideation, this dreaming. I am curious to just open it up and hear how that experience was for you. Did anything stand out? Was anything sparked from what someone shared or what came to you?
And this morning, and I'm also often reminded in more or less architectural spaces about these being future relics and what that means about the built world that we agree to all the time by living through it and living with it, but that these are their relics. And what we'll make of them and what stories we'll tell about what happened in them.
Yeah, so the perspective shift of like how will future people perceive this that we are building now? Yeah, so I'm curious to hear. Yeah, go ahead.
I love coming back and seeing regulated nervous systems over here, and seeing themes of just this my abundance of time and just ability to slow down and have compassion and real true connection with each other and the spaces that we are part of.
Thank you. Other folks, is there a theme that stood out to you or something that came through?
Well, I think what was really fun about this experience was first sharing visions with your small group and then walking around and seeing some of those visions reflected on some of the other groups wrote, and it was really validating and brought up that hey, we are more unified and there's a lot of commonalities on how we imagine the future to be. So for example, the abundance of time and how time is really valuable.
Yeah, so it turns out we have similar longings, right? It's not just you. Yeah.
I wouldn't say surprise. I mean, I think for sure, to what everyone's saying, I think it did give me oh wow, this is rad. A lot of us are thinking the same, and okay, cool. I'm not just in a silo, and so I think that was something that was really cool about it all, and even the ability to world build, right? Just to dream and assume, okay, what if, just to give yourself the opportunity to sit down and really think about what needs to get either torn down or reshifted. I think that was a really fun. I forget which table it was that really got me to. I think it was the governance one. I think that we were kind of how because then the question is oh well, do we destroy the idea of a nation state? Is that even how far do we go to reconstruct this idea, right? Because even that starting there is something that it's a modern thing if we really look at history and how it came to be. So that was fun just to really be thinking. I've never ever thought of oh, should we restructure and not even think of nation states anymore? And anyways, that was cool. That was rad. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So really opening up perspective and letting go of our assumptions about how the world operates. There's a Ursula Le Guin quote about, it's hard to imagine the fall of capitalism, but at one point the divine right of kings was assumed. I'm paraphrasing, I don't remember the exact quote, but yeah, at one point people believed in the divine right of kings, and obviously that's not true anymore. So yeah, so what's possible beyond what we assume now, and what would actually support life, and what would actually support what we long for, and the ability to be present in our lives and communities. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd also just love to highlight what has to happen here and here to give ourselves permission to even start to ask those questions, what if this, what if that, and noticing that our lives are not built, and these systems are not built for us to question those things. And so to really take it upon ourselves to do it for ourselves and with each other.
And I would love to start maybe imagining into, what if we brought some of this that you've just surfaced, these longings that you've just surfaced, into now? Like, are there things that you see here or heard here or felt in your own body that you could bring, or we collectively could bring more into community life now?
I definitely think that one of the questions of how do we resolve conflict or how do we handle conflict is something that can be very useful for right now. Just kind of like, what does that look like on an interpersonal level, but also what does that look like on a relational to yourself level of how one, even is conflicted with themselves, recognizing like the multiplicities that we all have and the contradictions that we all have as well, and even in our values, even in our futures and our actions. And I think that's something that, start practicing with ourselves and with our community.
Love that. Thank you for naming our own internal contradictions. But also, like, why wait? Like, this is something we can learn and practice now. Why wait 7 generations? Yeah. How about other things? Were there glimmers or something sparked?
One that was really challenging for me was who is here. And I know that there's so many challenges with migration, and I was like, okay, there was one that said everyone, and so I'm like, okay, so the system can only sustain so much. So I was just thinking, like, a lot of people are fleeing because of the situations in the South or in Central America, and just like in a world, ideally, they would have to flee, and the people that want to be here are here. So that I've been processing it because it was very challenging, and I didn't have enough time to think about it. But it was something that I was like, okay, I can't answer this right now. But yeah, just that was one of the questions that kind of stopped me from moving on to anything else because it was challenging for me to answer.
Yeah, it's not a simple answer. Yeah. Thank you for naming the challenge. Yeah.
Restorative practices in terms of how we like self-govern or in different relational settings for conflict resolution. That's something that I think some places are starting to embrace now, and we can have a lot more of that. I also think that at least I'm starting to see more opportunities for reduced work, but still getting paid adequately. And so that's something that maybe we'll start to see more of, hopefully. But let's see if I can get the thought back. It's touch and go. It was related to, we have lots of, in my opinion, we have lots of barriers in place. And some of those barriers we can't, are much harder to change than others. But embracing an opportunity, embracing the, how can I say yes instead of how can I say no, and finding out more opportunities to remove those barriers or to work around them as often as we can. And anyone working in nonprofit or in any of these sectors that we're probably all here representing, we do that as much as possible. But kind of spreading that to other spaces, how can I say yes to make this happen? Because there's a lot of barriers and obstacles in the way that really don't need to be there. We created them, we could certainly take them away.
Yeah, so focusing on the possibility and how do we actually make it more possible. Yeah, thank you.
What I'd like to just add to that, and I would love to hear then what you have to offer too, is just based off of just the obstacles that you shared and sort of the block that you had around imagining like who's here. Something that I have found in our dreaming processes with our community is that like sometimes blockages come up, and to just make space for those, that like it can be hard to dream and imagine of a future when things are also really hard too. And one of our community members, when they led a dreaming and visioning process, they made space for that grief that was coming up in that circle. And then making space for that grief helped to make space for the possibility. And so, yeah, holding space for that, and then holding space for possibility.
I really liked seeing how many people talked about slowness and just more intentionality. And I really like to think about how a lot of what we need for the future has been done and was done until very recently. And so a lot of the new things we need for the future are very old things, and we are living in a time that is by far the exception to the rule of how humans live. And there's still people who know how we as humans have lived with respect and love and belonging to nature, mostly indigenous people. But we're all indigenous to somewhere, and we all come from people who mostly lived on Earth for for 100,000 years without creating climate change and a lot of what we're facing because of the last about 150 years.
Thank you. I see that sparked something.
No, yes. Actually, speaking to what you're saying, how there's things that we've known that have kind of got lost. I was listening to this podcast conversation between comedian Trevor Noah and Simon Sinek. And the conversation was on loneliness, and about how there's a lot of, like, you can find a lot of courses or programs that teach you how to be a great leader. And there's a lot of courses and classes that teach you how to be in a good couple. But there's nothing out there that focuses on friendship. And one thing that you're saying, that a lot of things about loneliness is that we forgot how to be friends. And what it is to be a friend is to be there. Like, you know, and he was talking like, can you sit with someone in their depression and just be there with them? You know, can you just, and just thinking like, and that's something, you know, like to be a friend, you gotta stop thinking about yourself, you know? And so just going to just even those things, like, that's what got me thinking about, like, oh, maybe do we, you know, like, start thinking about how to become I took it personally because I was like, oh, shoot, I need to relearn, am I a good friend? And how can I go back to becoming a good friend? You know, so that's something, just thinking about how, and that's what community is, right? You're like, you know, you're a homie, you know, you're there for them. And so it's like just something, just that's sparked that thought.
Yeah, thank you.
That just sparked something because when you just mentioned like there's not enough like books or courses on friendship, which is absolutely true. But I also do want to share that I was had just listened to a book on friendship. Yes, called Platonic by Dr. Marissa G. Franco, who is like doctor, female person of color, hits all the good stuff, and just it was a really good book. So if anyone wants a rec.
Love the resources.
Yeah, and I just wanted to connect what you were saying. It's such an important point, and connect that to sort of the capitalist trajectory, which is that I remember hearing a feminist author make a link between Ford and sort of automobile production and promoting the nuclear family as a way of, you know, providing housing, making workers happy so that then they would be productive in making cars. And so I think that isolates us, right? And so we lose those skills of being in friendship and being in community because we're focused on this like singular family model. So I just think that's a really important thing that you brought up.
Wow, that's a new fact to me. Thank you. Yeah, and so what are we building, like literally physically, but also in our relationships, in our communities?
I also think we know or have a collective definition of what work is. And I personally like, no, I'm not going to remember her name. French philosopher from the World War II era who, she said, what I am, I endure. Everything else is work. And she didn't mean it as toil, although it can be toil, but it's work. This is the thing that everything else is work. And getting to understanding how we fit with that as we age, as we support other people coming up. Yeah, so, yeah. There.
Was this Simone de Beauvoir? Yeah. No. Simone Weil. Thank you. Weil. And is the thought here like everything else is work, meaning everything else is an action? It is done? Yeah. 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 So we create the world by what we do. Yeah.
I think the first thing I was thinking about was like the slowing down and just being present and not rushing through things or like basing my worth off of my productivity. And I'm a student and I do like some side gigs and stuff, and it's like I feel this like pressure from school, but yeah, it's something that very much calls to me and I love learning. So I feel like I would love to see, more community learning. And then we're talking about like, how can this, like, why do we have to wait? And so like even this, right, it feels like very much more appealing. And then I feel like I had another thought too. Oh, like even, just slowing down and like, how has that impacted like our policies and like, these officials that are trying to like rush and push things through. And like, so maybe it's like, we don't have to completely destroy this system, but maybe we like find a way to slow it down and be more present to like what it is we're actually trying to create.
Yeah, there's a group of indigenous folks who a couple of years ago put out an invitation around regenerative agriculture, specifically to like just be aware of the ways that we think about it is actually replicating supremacist cultural patterns, and particularly around climate change. I'll connect it to what you said in a moment. Of having this like emphasizing fear and urgency, and they shared from the indigenous perspective, it's part of a cycle of life and death. And what if we orient to composting and like the things that we don't want now that are not serving us now, that we support them to compost, so to disintegrate so that those resources can then be forwarded into what we want to grow. Yeah. So
Also, I think like something I've been thinking about and like share very sparingly is I really love the concept of Chinese medicine and the yin and the yang and the good and the bad. And like, yes, I would love to see things differently, but also remembering like that these wars are bringing us together, that the things that are occurring right now, it's like why we're all here. So to like remember that, and not that we can't aim for something better, but that like once we achieve that, like I think that there will still be a balance of, and hopefully it's a better balance, but I think there will still be things to resolve and there will still be conflict, and
yeah, we're not aiming for a perfect world, because that would be boring, first of all, and also like what is perfection? Like, so balance is what we're seeking to create. So I'd love to move into like, where do we go from here? Yeah.
So connecting our dreams and our visions into this moment, and what steps we can take that make this vision come true. Something that I really love about dreaming and visioning is that, like, to know that what I'm doing is connected to future generations, and to just have that sheer connection. And so I already heard of like very feasible things to do in this lifetime, like be a better friend, and slow down. And so I'm curious if there are things that you can do today, tomorrow, into this next week that support that vision.
Yeah, so we want you to take a moment to check in with yourself, like based on what you experienced in the visioning and in what you heard and received from what others shared. What is something that you would like to actually bring forward and put into action to shape the world we want to grow?
We'd love for you to write it down on a Post-it note and stick it on when you're ready to stick it on that piece of paper over there.
Yeah, and as you're, once you've written your Post-it note, if you would like to turn to a neighbor and share your one thing, sometimes that sharing can help strengthen our resolve, our commitment to actually carrying it out. So if that calls to you, maybe that will be a support.
Mike is here too if you want to say it. He wants volume.
Yeah, speak it into being. So we have a couple invitations to give you as we wrap up. One is, if you feel called or inspired to share this kind of process with a community you are a part of, we have a toolkit and would love to share it with you. So you can, our contact information is on the screen. You could also give us your contact information. There's little cards on the tray under that big lamp in back that you could write your contact information on if you would like us to get in touch with you. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, and dreaming. This is dreaming in community, and you are. We have so many people dreaming with us, and so we actually have a dream garden, and so all of these responses will be inputted into our dream garden, which is available for you to access online, and continue to come back to these dreams and nourish them in your own communities. So there's the kit, the toolkit for you to do this. There's the Dream Lab, the Dream Garden.
Yes. I already mentioned contact information. There's also a little postcard-sized card back there about Food Culture Collective if you'd like to take it. And with the Dream Garden, we've begun commissioning visual artists to interpret some of these community dreams to share them back out. So if you follow us on social media, you'll get a glimpse of those as they become available.
So on your way out, we'd love to see what you post up there, and I'd like to just by sharing a quote by Jovida and Marisha. Are we brave enough to imagine beyond the boundaries of the real, and then do the hard work of sculpting reality from our dreams? I think we all are. And I just feel a lot of, at the beginning I said that I take dreaming very seriously, and I mean that, and so I'm really grateful for your willingness to step into possibility, your courage to be with like the blocks and the difficult things that come up. And I just feel a lot of potential for what is possible moving forward together.
Please do share your sticky on the paper as you go out, because it helps us know how this landed. And we really appreciate learning that. Yeah.
What happens to these Post-its and papers? And did you guys, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so these all get planted. Our dreams are seeds, and they are planted in our dream garden, which is on our website. All of these questions and the responses to those questions are inputted on the website for you to see live. Yeah, and it's really like we're these are it's owned by all of us, and it's our responsibility to these dreams to grow them and to nourish them.
It's all mixed together, yes, across time and place. Yeah.
But we're happy to share. We'll be collecting this at the end, and so happy to, if anyone is interested, just come up to me and I can make sure to send you dreams from this specific dream lab. Yeah.
Thank you so much.